You found the Creepsters vault. New horrors are added every week. Like, subscribe. When and where did you find the vault? Tell the Creepster in the comments. We can't keep it open without you. And don't forget to close the blinds. I wish I could tell you exactly when this started, like there was some neat crease in the calendar where normal life ended and the rest of it began, but it's messier than that. If I'm honest, it began as a feeling, small, almost polite, that something was edging into my life from the corners. A number I didn't recognize leaving a voicemail without speaking, a typing bubble that popped up in our texts at 3 in the morning when I knew I was asleep, and he swore he was too. A friend request from a profile with my name spelled wrong, following my coworkers in the same order I would. Harmless things, if you look at them one at a time. You only feel the shape when you step back. Jess said I needed to get back out there. She said it like brushing my teeth. A basic chore I'd neglected. She had a friend, well, a friend of a friend, named Alex, and the way she pitched him felt scripted, like she'd rehearsed and was careful not to oversell. The good kind of shy, she said, which I laughed at. We exchanged a few messages during the week. He was easy, polite, the kind of attentive that reads as rare when you've spent the last year with ghosts. He sent a picture of a coffee mug and a paperback with the cover half torn and wrote, "Saturday. That cafe you posted about in your story. I hadn't posted about it in months." I told myself he must have scrolled. The day of the date, I woke fizzy with nerves that had nothing to do with anticipation. On the train to work, my reflection in the window looked like someone else's. At lunch, Jess texted to see what I was wearing and asked 3 times if I'd shared my location with her. I laughed it off and said she was being dramatic. She sent me 3 red heart emojis and a dagger. When I left the office, my rideshare arrived 2 minutes early, except the license plate didn't match, and the driver rolled down the window and said my name like a question, almost right. I waved him on and ordered another. When the real one pulled up, I watched it go through 2 yellow lights like it was trying to outrun something behind us. I didn't ask what. The cafe was the kind of place that smells like espresso and old paperbacks. I like the uneven tables and the chalkboard menu that always lists soup they never have. I chose a corner booth with a view of both the door and the street. My pulse made a metronome of the straw wrapper. After 7 minutes, the bell over the door chimed and a man in a gray jacket stepped in, almost ducking like the doorway might bite him. He scanned, found me, shaped his mouth around a smile that didn't quite bloom. "Emma," he said, and I nodded because that was my name, and this was the script. He sat carefully, like the chair had rules. The first 10 minutes were tidy. Traffic, weather, how we both claimed to hate small talk while performing it like a dance. When he laughed, he touched his throat, not his mouth. He knew the indie movie I'd mentioned in texts, but when I asked his favorite scene, he described a shot that doesn't exist. The way he looked at me wasn't flirty or even curious. It was the way you look at a new appliance to figure out where the buttons are. Every few minutes he glanced at the door as if he'd lent money to the next person who might walk through it. The strangeness gathered like lint. He asked what time I leave for work most mornings, and when I deflected, he changed the subject without blinking, then circled back later and made it sound casual. He asked about my parents' street, by name, not by neighborhood, and I hadn't said I still visit on Sundays. He said he'd never met Jess, but smiled like it was almost funny I thought he had. He said he finds people for a living and then let the silence sit between us while I set it down in my brain, not sure where it fit. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. trust him." I didn't look up right away. I let the words float in that thin space between breath and heartbeat. When I finally lifted my eyes, he was already watching. "Everything okay?" he asked, and his voice was gentle, patient, like a teacher encouraging a child to admit a secret she's been practicing. I excused myself to the bathroom and locked the door. The mirror showed a girl whose mouth was too small for the air. I texted back, "Who is this?" The reply arrived before my hand stopped shaking. "I'm Alex, he's not." The sentence slid through me like a cold wire. I asked where he was. "Outside," he wrote. "I was supposed to meet you." He intercepted the messages. "Don't leave with him." The bathroom had a small window that opened onto the street. I stood on the trash can and peered out. Under the streetlight, a man paced, phone in hand, checking the door like his watch. He fit Jess's description exactly. He looked scared in a way that didn't perform. A knock at the bathroom door was almost polite. "Emma," he said. Gray jacket on the other side of the wood. The doorknob remained still. "You okay in there?" The second knock arrived without politeness. "Come on, you don't want to be rude." I texted the man outside. "He's at the door." From the other side of the wall, the cafe made the sound of a plate hitting tile and a chair scraping back like something was being erased. I cracked the bathroom door in a sliver and saw Gray jacket running, shoulder clipping a table. A coffee going sideways. I saw the man from the street come through the entry like a question he already knew the answer to. For a second they were both silhouettes, and I thought maybe this is the part of the story where men fight for girls in bathrooms and everyone claps. But by the time I reached the counter, both of them were gone, and the bell over the door rocked as if it had swallowed a bird. The police were friendly in the way people are when they assume the worst thing that happened is you felt a little scared. We gave statements. A barista apologized for the broken plate I didn't break. Jess arrived, breathing like she'd sprinted the whole way. She hugged me too long and asked twice if I was angry, as if she'd conjured this with a careless wish. I said I wasn't. It was true in that moment and not true at all. The cameras, of course, hadn't recorded. Maintenance. The word felt like a shrug. The officer who took my report wrote quickly, with the confidence of a man who has seen all the ways a story can end and bets most of them aren't tonight. When I checked my phone to show them the thread wasn't there. Every message with Alex, both Alexes, was gone. The officer asked if I might have deleted them. It took me 3 seconds to decide not to cry. For a day, the world resumed its shape, as if it had stretched around me for a moment, and then remembered how to be itself. I went to work. I replied to emails. I made a list of groceries I wouldn't buy. On the second night, I came home to find my front door unlocked, which I do sometimes when my hands are full. Only I remembered locking it because I always tapped the deadbolt 3 times, a rhythm I could drum in my sleep. Inside, the mail lay on the table the way I leave it. The bedroom window was latched and not latched in a way that let air smell like rain. I told myself it was nothing because nothing's cheap and easy to carry. The first photo arrived at 1:04 a.m., grainy from a distance, me at the grocery store, a basket in the crook of my elbow and my head tilted toward the apples in a way I didn't know I do. The second, me at the crosswalk near my apartment, the walk sign frozen mid-step like a joke. The third, me asleep, side-lit by the blue of the charging cube, the corner of my bedroom mirror catching the door behind me. I didn't scream. I sat up and listened to the hum of the fridge and counted the screws in the outlet cover and asked the darkness not to be busy for 5 minutes. I went back to the police with the photos, and this time they leaned forward and spoke in tones that carried words like, "Follow up," and "We'll be in touch," and "Don't stay alone if you don't have to." They asked about exes, They asked about anyone who might want to scare me for sport. They asked about scams and stalkers and the new thing where strangers become a hobby. I said no to all of it, and yes to the part where I was tired. The real Alex texted to ask if I'd sleep better if he sat with me on the phone a while. We fell asleep like that, not together, not quite strangers, our breaths echoing until one of us stopped snoring and the other laughed. He called me brave. He said he felt weirdly responsible. He said the word intercept, like he knew exactly how to do it, and was trying not to sound like he did. The next day, we met at noon on a park bench with a visible security camera I could point to and say, "See, we exist," simultaneously. He wore a navy jacket and a face that made apologies even when he was ordering coffee. We talked about anything but the story we were in. He smiled like someone who's careful with fragile glass. The texts slowed and then sharpened, shorter, meaner, a single word at dusk. Soon, a single photo in daylight, my key ring on my palm, a new key added where I didn't add it, a voicemail with 30 seconds of not breathing where someone pressed the microphone against nothing and waited with me. I started leaving the TV on. I started sleeping in the clothes I'd wear if I had to run. I tied a hair across the hinge of my bedroom door. In the morning, it was broken. I pressed a matchstick into the slide of my window and found it on the sill the next night. I learned the shape of my building at 3 a.m. by the sound of pipes. The fourth time I met Alex, he was late. He'd been steady until then, signing his texts with his name the way people do when they don't want to be mistaken. That day, he didn't sign at all. He arrived out of breath and very sorry. With 2 coffees and a joke he overloaded to sound casual. We sat on the bench where I could see myself in the reflection of a shop window behind him. I told him about the new key. He frowned like a man who knows locks and said he could change mine if I wanted. I wondered how often he says that to women he's only known a month. I didn't ask. On the way home, a car I'd never seen before took the turns I took and then parked when I parked and then kept idling when I went upstairs. I watched it from the kitchen and pretended to be thirsty. It left after 20 minutes and a lifetime. That night I dreamed of the cafe again. Except this time, when I excused myself, the bathroom had no mirror and the door didn't lock, and the man in the gray jacket knocked 6 times in pairs like a rhythm he thought I'd know. When I woke, there was a voicemail with that same pattern, 6 little taps against my ear. The number showed as my own. News breaks the way a voice does when you try to sound calm. In the middle of a Tuesday, our office went quiet except for the ping of headlines passing from desk to desk. A local story. A body found near the river. Male, early 30s, no ID. The article included a grainy still from a nearby storefront camera, a navy jacket, a face angled down. It looked like Alex from the side. It looked like 100 men who weren't. I sent the link to him anyway. He didn't reply. I told myself he was at work. I told myself phones die. I told myself the river is long and full of strangers. 2 days that felt like a month passed. Jess called 3 times and then came over with soup she knew I wouldn't eat and a duffel bag like she planned to move in. She sat on my couch and asked whether I'd noticed anything off about Alex, and when I said, "Which one?" she flinched like the word was a hand. She asked, very softly, whether I was sure she was the one who set me up. I laughed then, because what else do you do? And said, of course. Who else? It's your friend of a friend. She shook her head. She said she only ever said I should try again, that I'd be good at it. She said she never sent me a number. I went back through my messages to prove she had, but the thread with your classic cheerful link and a heart and a dagger had been trimmed. Clean, like a throat you don't check twice. mistake of searching the body in the river again. The article had updated. The man was identified, not publicly, next of kin. The line sat there like a closed door I didn't want to open. And I didn't, at least not with my hands. In my head, though, the door swung in both directions. If it was him, then who had I been texting at 2 a.m. when I thought I wasn't alone? If it wasn't him, then where was he? And who would be kind enough to vanish without explanation? I started to narrate my own movements to the empty room as if making sound would make me visible to someone besides myself. Keys on the table, I'd say. Locking the door, I'd say. 3 taps, you see? On Thursday, I woke to the smell of orange peel, the kind I associate with my mother in winter, and there were 3 curls of rind on the counter I didn't put there. My kitchen trash bag was tied differently than I tie it. On the coffee table, my mail lay sorted in 2 stacks, bills and not bills. The decision felt intimate and wrong. On the bathroom mirror, in the fog that hadn't dried from a shower I took in silence, there was the ghost of a word traced with a finger that waited. Soon. I made another report and learned the language of follow-ups and case numbers. A detective with soft eyes told me sometimes these things stop, not because you win, but because the other person gets bored. I asked what I should do with all the hours between now and bored. He said, "Don't make it easy." The advice lived in my pocket like a stone. 3 weeks after the cafe, I got a package with no return. Inside, a paperback with the cover half torn, the way he'd sent in that first message, except this one had a name in the front, not mine. Pressed between page 204 and 205, a receipt from the cafe, time-stamped the night we met, 2 drinks and a cookie neither of us ordered. The back of the receipt had a doodle of a door. Below it, a number. When I called, it rang in the bedroom for 1 second before my phone cut the sound. When I held my breath, I could hear the smallest echo of my own voice asking who's there, as if I'd ever get an answer I liked. The last time the real Alex wrote, if there is a real Alex at all, he said he was out of town for a few days, no signal, talk soon. The bubble flickered and then sat still. Days became a rhythm. In the mornings I would check the hinge hair and the matchstick and the orange peels that only showed up once. In the afternoons I would make normal errands holy, because normal is worship when you think you've lost it. In the evenings I would ask the locks politely to remember me. People want an ending. I want one too. I want to say the police called and said we got him, or he called and said I'm sorry, or Jess called and said she remembered everything and it was only ever a misunderstanding that happened to other girls and borrowed my name for a while. But the truth is quieter and more impatient. The truth is that most days nothing happens at all, which is its own kind of haunting when you've taught your nerves to jump at the hinge. Sometimes, late, I hear that knock again. 6 taps in pairs, not on the wood but inside my chest, and I decide not to answer because that's a choice I still own. Sometimes, earlier, I walk past the cafe and see a man in a gray jacket who is just a man in a jacket, and I keep walking and don't make a story where there isn't one. Sometimes, at 3:12 a.m., my phone lights my room with a square of cold daylight, and a single word swims up from a number that refuses to be a person. Soon. I don't know if the person who sat across from me that night was the one who intercepted our messages, or just a shape sent to teach me that I live in a body that can be found. I don't know if the person outside under the streetlight exists for anyone but me anymore. I don't know if Jess remembers a version of events where she did exactly what she thinks and still accidentally opened a door. I don't know. And that is the part that keeps breathing when I'm very still. But here's the thing I do know. I learned to watch the edges. I learned that stories don't end when the night does, and that the quiet that follows is not peace. It is the sound of something moving farther into the walls. I learned that my name, said by a stranger, can sound like a question I don't have to answer. And I learned that when someone says they find people, you should believe them. If you go on a blind date after this, and you will, because life is rude like that, pick a seat where you can see the door and the street and your own reflection at the same time. Teach your hands a rhythm for the lock. Share your location with someone who knows your laugh, not just your last name. And if a man in a gray jacket looks at you like he's reading instructions, smile the way you do when you've already decided which door you'll run through if you need to. Don't leave with him. Don't leave with any of them. Not until you're sure the story you're in has enough light to see your own shoes. When your phone buzzes at 3:12 and says, "Soon," put it face down and let the word sit with itself. Some promises are only as strong as the silence you give them. And some nights, if you listen closely enough, you can hear the moment a story decides to let you go. I'm still listening. I think maybe someday it might. Until then, I lock the door. 3 taps. I whisper my name to the empty room like a password only I know. I make tea. I clean the counter until it shines in the dark. I leave the bathroom mirror fogged and blank. I let the voicemail fill with breathing that isn't mine. I turn off the lights. I wait for morning. And I tell myself that the next time anyone knocks, I won't be here. I'll already have left. I'll already be halfway to the version of my life where the cafe is just a place that sells coffee, and gray is just a color, and soon is just a word I've learned to ignore. And if that isn't true yet, it will be. Soon. I'm not sure if it's worse to be stood up or to wish you had been. Before that night, I would have said being stood up. It stings, sure, but it's clean. You feel foolish, you go home. You text your best friend embarrassing emojis, and the world resumes its shape. I learned there's a third option, a date that arrives exactly on time, in exactly the right outfit, with exactly the wrong person inside of it. I learned you can be looked at by someone wearing your match's face, and still feel like you've been introduced to no one. We matched on a Thursday. Noah, ordinary in the way that puts you at ease. Travel photos without the flex. A dog with a ridiculous grin. One prompt that made me laugh. 2 truths and a lie. I've been in a submarine. I hate peanut butter. I can't whistle. His messages were not clever, thank God. They were steady. How was your day? Favorite coffee order? Okay, but is Die Hard a Christmas movie? We moved to texting after 2 days, and he sent a photo from his office desk that looked like any office on Earth. A mug with a chip in the rim, a sticky note with a half-finished to-do list, a potted plant clinging to life. He proposed the rooftop bar I hadn't been to, the one with string lights and a view that makes everyone say, "Wow," even when they're trying not to. "I'll get there a little early," he wrote. "Elevator's on the left when you enter. I'm the one who can whistle." I typed and backspaced, "Teach me." The day itself conspired to keep me distracted. Back-to-back meetings bled into a late lunch. My co-worker confessed she'd been stalking a crush's Goodreads. I Googled what counts as smart casual and landed on black jeans and a soft sweater I wear when I want to look like I tried without trying. I was halfway out the door when I doubled back to water a plant that never looks thirsty. I checked that my window was latched twice. I changed earrings. I changed my mind. Then I changed nothing and left. The elevator ride in that high-rise felt like standing inside a light bulb. The city fell away in panes of glass as the panel ticked upward. A bachelorette group in sequins crowded into the corner, all perfume and squeals. A man in a blazer looked at nothing on his phone. My stomach did that small airplane drop at floor 20. When the doors opened, they opened onto a stage. Dusk sinking blue over the skyline, string lights making haloed circles on glossy tables. A soft hum of conversations in the key of first date. I arrived early, only by 3 minutes, but early enough to feel like a child pretending to be an adult. I picked a table near the railing, texted Jess a here with a photo of the view, and ordered sparkling water to hold like a prop, so I'd have somewhere to put my hands when my hands didn't know where to be. He arrived 5 minutes later. Noah, taller than the photos and somehow dimmer, like he'd been turned down half a stop. He wore a dark jacket, jeans, the careful smile of someone conscious of his teeth. He waved the way people wave when they're not sure how their body looks doing it. "Hey," he said, "you found it." His voice was pleasant. It belonged to 10,000 other men. We shook hands, not a hug, a handshake. I don't hate handshakes on first dates exactly, but they announce a kind of distance you have to cross later, and not everyone can. He sat, glanced at the menu without really reading it, and asked about my day. So we did that part. Work, weather, the way Mondays pretend to be Fridays sometimes. He made a joke about the elevator music. He ordered an old-fashioned and the bartender nodded like he already knew. When I brought up coffee, It started the way most bad ideas do, with a friend insisting it would be fun. Maya had been on me for months about getting back into dating. "You're wasting your best years hiding behind Netflix," she'd said over drinks, sliding her phone across the table like it was a peace offering. On it, a profile for someone named Adrian. His photo was nice, not model perfect, not trying too hard. Dark hair, thoughtful eyes, a crooked smile that looked like it didn't show up often, but when it did, it meant something. His bio was short. 2 lines about loving to cook and believing every city has one perfect hidden restaurant. Maya swore she knew him through friends of friends. That phrase always sounds safe until you remember no one ever defines how many friends away we're talking about. I hesitated for a week before agreeing. I'd had enough first dates where the only memorable part was the check. But Adrian didn't text like other people. His messages felt curated, not in a fake way, but in a way that made you want to read them twice. He never replied instantly, but when he did, the words felt like they'd been chosen, not tossed off while half watching TV. He asked questions that weren't just surface level, about favorite smells, about the weirdest dream I'd ever had, about whether I thought people could really know each other. It felt different, intentional. He suggested we skip the usual coffee or drinks and instead meet for dinner at his place. "It's my turn to host," he said. "I promise I cook better than most restaurants." I laughed, made a joke about serial killers, and he replied, "If I were one, I'd make dessert first." I told myself it was a good sign that he could joke about it. The night of the date, I almost bailed. Work had been brutal, traffic worse, and my nerves were tangled enough that I spilled foundation on my shirt 5 minutes before I was supposed to leave. But Maya's earlier text, "Don't be boring, go," pushed me out the door. His building was in an older part of the city, the kind with brick facades and ornate metal balconies that sagged just a little with age. The street was quiet, almost too quiet for 7 p.m. A single streetlight buzzed, casting a cone of light on wet pavement. The hallway leading to his apartment smelled faintly of rain and something I couldn't place, earthy but sharp, like damp leaves mixed with iron. His door opened before I knocked twice. Adrian looked even better in person, taller than I'd guessed, wearing a soft gray sweater that looked like it belonged to another decade. He smiled, small but real, and stepped back to let me in. The apartment was warm and dimly lit, candles pooling light across a long wooden dining table set for 2. In the corner, a small record player spun something slow and unfamiliar. The air smelled incredible. Roasted garlic, herbs, something sweet underneath. "You weren't kidding," I said. "This smells amazing." He grinned and gestured toward the kitchen, where a pot simmered and a loaf of bread cooled on a wire rack. "I like cooking for people," he said. "It's more intimate." We started with wine. I'm not much of a wine person, but it was smooth and rich enough to make me feel warm after 2 sips. He asked about my day, my neighborhood, my family. The questions felt personal but not pushy, just enough to make me talk. Still, something about his gaze made me hyper-aware of every word I said. He didn't look away often. When he did, it wasn't to glance around the room. It was always down, as though he were replaying something in his head. The first course was soup. Simple, but perfect. I caught myself wondering if he'd planned the wine pairing too, because it matched so well it felt deliberate. By the time the main course came out, I was more relaxed than I expected to be. But as I cut into it, I noticed something strange. A faint metallic aftertaste. It wasn't unpleasant, but it lingered in a way I didn't like. Halfway through, I started to feel light. Not dizzy exactly, just a little separated from myself, like my head was a step behind the rest of me. I told myself it was the wine on an empty stomach. Adrian noticed. "You okay?" he asked, his voice smooth, unhurried. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Just tired. Long day." He offered to slow things down, maybe skip dessert. I surprised myself by saying no. I wanted to see what he'd made. When he brought it out, my stomach turned. Not because it looked bad. It was beautiful, like something from a magazine, but because something in me screamed not to eat it. A slice of chocolate tart, glossy and perfect, with a small curl of white chocolate on top. He set it in front of me, his eyes watching not my face but my hands, like he was waiting to see what I'd do next. I stalled, asking about the recipe. He told me it was a family tradition, his voice dipping slightly on the last word, almost like it was private. I picked up the fork, held it for a second too long, and then set it back down. That's when I saw it. Just past his shoulder, on a narrow shelf, sat a row of framed photographs. At first glance, they were nothing. Smiling people, different settings. But then I realized each was taken in the same room. This room, same table, same angle, different faces, always two plates, always a glass of wine in front of the other person, and on the edge of every frame, barely in shot, Adrian, watching. My chest tightened. "Those are nice," I said, nodding toward them, trying to keep my voice casual. He didn't look back. "Memories," he said simply, then leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "I don't like forgetting people." The air between us felt heavier. My eyes flicked to the door, measuring the distance. I laughed, too high-pitched, and pushed the tart slightly away. "You're really into hosting, huh?" He smiled, and it wasn't the same smile he'd greeted me with. This one was thinner, knowing. It's important to make guests feel at home. Something in my head clicked. The smell in the hallway, the wine, the heaviness in my limbs. I stood, steadying myself on the chair. "I should go," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Adrian didn't move. "You haven't finished dessert," he said quietly, like that fact alone was enough reason to stay. My heart was hammering, but my voice came out steadier than I felt. "I'm full." I stepped toward the door. He stayed seated, but his eyes followed me with a calm I didn't trust. When I reached the hallway, the air felt colder. I didn't look back until I was in my car, doors locked, hands shaking on the wheel. From the window above, I saw him watching, just a shadow in the flicker of candlelight, unmoving. Aftermath. The next morning, there was a package outside my apartment door. Inside was the chocolate tart, untouched except for one bite missing. No note, just the dessert, perfect and waiting. I threw it in the trash and called Maya. She swore she'd never met Adrian in person, said she'd only heard about him from someone she barely knew at work. That person, she claimed, had since quit. Over the next week, I started noticing small changes. My front door sticking when I unlocked it. The faint smell of roasted garlic in my apartment hallway late at night. A wine cork on my counter I didn't remember opening. Then the photographs started, slipped under my door in plain white envelopes, each one taken through my apartment window. Me cooking, me on the couch, me asleep, always from the same angle, as if the photographer knew exactly where to stand. One night I woke to music playing softly in my living room. Low, slow, the same record he'd had spinning during dinner. My apartment was locked, no sign of forced entry. The record player was mine, but I hadn't touched it in years. I called the police. They searched, found nothing, suggested maybe I had a stalker but couldn't do much without proof. 3 days later, I came home to find my dining table set for two, candles lit, a bottle of wine breathing beside two plates, and on my plate, a slice of chocolate tart.